Wagyu ka Khalsa, Wagyu Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome back to another episode of this podcast. I know it's been a couple months, but um, things got a little bit hectic for us and the entire team, and we had to focus on a bunch of other stuff, especially finishing up school. For me, was finishing up my last quarter of it as an undergrad, so that was kind of stressful. But we are back, and I'm happy to say that we're back. We'll be bringing episodes every month like it was previously planned and how we were doing it before. And we just want to say thank you again for everybody for following along and still, following with us even after our 2 month break. Um, Time flies, like anybody says these days, and it's been kind of a challenge to try to come back and do these because as you can see today, we're joined by five amazing guests where I'll let them introduce themselves here in a bit. But trying to get people together to do a podcast is much harder than you would ever think because of everybody's busy schedules. I totally understand my schedule got busy as well. So that's why we weren't able to meet or do anything. But this episode, we're joined again, like I said, by five amazing guests. I'll let them introduce themselves one by one here quickly, and they can kind of share something that Jakara launched last. I think it's this previous year was the first year that it was launched. And Jasmeet, if you want to kind of introduce yourself and also introduce and kind of explain what the program is for those that are listening, and then each of you guys can introduce yourselves afterwards.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. My name is Jasmeet. I am from Fresno County area. So we launched a program called CAD internship. So we did an internship that's about like health and mainly about substance use. So we picked 10 interns in certain regions. So we picked Fresno, we picked Bakersfield, Tracy, Yuba area, and the Bay area. So there's like 5 areas that we picked. We had 5 fellows, so like me, but nobody else is here, but I'm here today. And then we picked 10 interns at a certain high school. So at Fresno, it was at Central East. I'm not sure what the other high schools are called, so bear with me. But yeah, so we just talked about educating students on drugs and alcohol. So we picked 5 different substances, and then we educated them every week about what they were. And then we went to the Gurdwara and did some tabling. And then we also did school tabling as well to educate the high schoolers. And we also educated the community. And then we also implemented a Narcan policy into the schools as well. So we would go into the school board meetings, and the students, the high school students, would ask them about the Narcan policy and implementing it with the school staff and their volunteers or even teachers, anybody that's working there to get trained. So we can have that around campus rather than just having it with the police officer or even with the nurse. And some schools didn't even have it at all. So we just educated. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything else, but that's what we did.
And Avreen, if you want to just introduce, just as all of you guys introduce yourselves, just kind of say where you guys are from, what school, so we kind of get an idea of where you guys are situated and located.
I'm Avreen Kaur, and I was a senior this year at Central East High School in the Fresno County.
I'm Jamal, and I was a junior at Central East, also CAD intern.
Amazing. And Inderpal, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Inderpal Singh. I am currently located in Bakersfield, California. I was a CAD intern at Ridgeview High School, but recently I graduated and I will be attending UC Berkeley in the fall in hopes of majoring in economics and minoring in political science.
Good for you. And Saj?
Hi, everyone. My name is Saj. I was also a CAD intern at Yuba City High School, based in Yuba City. I was a senior, so I graduated. I'm going to be doing Yuba College for 1 year, then transferring, but currently I'm majoring in political science.
Thank you for sharing, and congrats to all the graduating seniors. I graduated, but kind of in college, but still we can all celebrate together as being graduates and looking forward to what's next in our lives. Just going back to you quickly. I kind of know a little bit of your, background and your kind of your story, but if you don't mind, sharing a little bit about your background and kind of how did you get involved in this program, because this program is like very specific in terms of the targets and the work that has to be done as a fellow, and kind of just how did you get involved?
So my background is I am a substance abuse counselor for Prodigy Healthcare in Fresno. So I work with adolescents, so like middle school to high school. So I talk about drugs and alcohol with students every day, and I counsel them about like control or even becoming like sober or anything that they're trying to maintain. So when Nandeep, that's like the main guy for Jakara, he came up to me and was like, hey, we got this cool like grant and I feel like you would do so great in this. And I was just like, I already have 2 jobs, but okay. So he explained to me like how great it would be to have like an inside, so I can already tell certain people about drugs and alcohol, and I already have like a background of like what students are doing in the high schools. So he was like, can we please do this? And so, yeah, it's like a 3-year grant that we got. And so I was like, yeah, I'm down. I want to teach the community about like everything, because I feel like the Punjabi community has a lot of drugs, talk about it. And so even with the background that I have, I don't see a lot of Punjabi people in there. And so it's really hard to even get them to open up or even getting the counseling that they need. So having this, it was great to have them like go out there and like just talk to just the good blood. Like it was amazing to see certain people coming up to us and be like, hey, this is amazing. Like, why aren't we doing this more? And so that's why I was like, we have to have this.
Yeah. And it's, it's amazing where I can only imagine, because there's nothing here in Sacramento that I could have been involved in, but like I can just imagine how like the older people at the Gurdwaras, they kind of like perceive this and kind of went about this, because for them it's like they think that unfortunately this is not reality, but they always see the good in every kid, but like you never know what like a kid can unfortunate situations they can fall into, and sometimes especially at like this young of an age you just never know. And instead of helping, sometimes people just try to like back off, and I just because there's no education there, and we need to slowly, and I'm just thankful for like a program like this where we're trying to slowly get to a point where we kind of get a better understanding, like a base understanding, where we can kind of address these issues without having to specifically, do things, and we just can kind of have a base education and going forward. So thank you, for sharing about that. And I just want to quickly ask one more question, and then we can kind of go through all the interns right after. If you don't mind sharing about like what a fellow is and like what type of role did you have throughout this year, just in case, anybody listening is interested in, looking for that position or something along those lines.
Yeah, of course. As a fellow, we helped kind of get the interns. So we had to interview interns for the program, and then we got to see like who we thought would be great in like, and who would want to actually be out there and talk to people. And then we also had like meetings with the other fellows. So we had a retreat, and then after the retreat, we had just Zoom calls that we would do. And then we would have to like look up certain drugs and alcohol that's in that community. So in Central area, we knew the 5 that we were dealing with and the main ones that we were dealing with. So we started off with those. And then with the fellows, you together come up with a work, like a slideshow. So we can show them like what the drugs mean, and then we give them homework to do. And then after that, we have to think about like places that we want to take them. So for Fresno, we took them to what was it called? A needle drive exchange. Sorry, I forgot what it was called. I was like, what? Yeah, so we took them to a needle drive exchange. So they got to see like people who drop off their needles, and then they get new, like clean needles to take with them. So that's educating on a different part. We also had a doctor there. So he taught them certain things, and they got to see certain things that were very like gross, but at the same time it was like good education as well. Yeah. If they're trying to go into the medical field, don't ask them what it was, because they might faint again. I don't want them to faint, because that was all bad.
I won't go into that.
Yeah, don't go into it because this one right here, Everine almost fainted, and I don't want that.
No.
So it was all bad. But yeah, so we just have to figure out things that we want in like to teach them. So we also had Prodigy Healthcare come out. So not just me, myself, but we had another coworker come by and explain what they do as a job and how what schools they're in. Because everybody thinks that Prodigy Healthcare is only for people who get in trouble or on probation or suspended or expelled. So that's why they wouldn't like they would never know if you're like a kid that doesn't get in trouble, they would never know Prodigy Healthcare is on their campus. And so we had them explain like anybody can be in it if they need the help. And so that's something that they got educated from. And then just going into the community. So tabling at the Gurdwara, we had uncles and stuff that would come. So it's just like you have to talk to people that are higher than us. So I had to talk to a superintendent, which I never thought I would have to do. And it's very nerve-wracking at my age still to talk to a superintendent from my school board. Like it was crazy just to talk to them and I'd like let them know like, hey, we're at your school. We're trying to do this or trying to implement things. So like as a fellow, you're like just trying to do the background stuff so the kids get as much as they can out of the program. So
yeah, and
it's great. Come join us. I'm like, okay, come join us. I know we're looking for more people in the Bakersfield area. I know Scuba already has like a few people, and then like Fresno already has their people. So we're just trying to find people in the Bakersfield area to apply. So whoever wants to apply in Baco.
I know we have a good amount of listeners from Bakersfield. So if you're listening to this right now and you're, if this is something you kind of want to do, like, you have an interest in doing, and like we just shared, there's so much that entails with it. It's just not like one focused thing about like, oh, you're only focusing on education. There's so many other skills that, you can learn and kind of help yourself because like learning these skills are very helpful going forward in life. But thank you so much. And I will start now going to the interns that have joined us because your guys' stories are one that I really want to hear because again, me going through high school here in the United States, I kind of saw things, but I also just kind of like turned the other way because at that time, I didn't know anything better to do, right? And I just wanted to go and Interpol, you can kind of start first, and just what were your first initial thoughts of this program when you first heard about it, when you first were approached about it, and kind of just go through that. And how did you did you think this was a problem where you lived?
So definitely I did think it was a huge problem where I lived, specifically at Ridgeview High School. I know every single day towards the morning and towards the afternoon, fire alarms at my school would go off every single day, right? And I didn't know the cause. I just thought it was malfunctioning fire alarms. But after speaking with our principal, he actually did tell us that these fire alarms went off because students were abusing substances. So every time they would go and vape in the bathroom, it would trigger the fire alarm. So just every single day I was exposed to this, especially at Ridgeview, and I wanted to help. And as soon as I heard of the Khair program and how they educate on substance abuse, my first thoughts were, I want to join, I want to sign up because I want to put myself at the forefront of making a difference on my campus.
Thank you for sure. Sage, if you want to go next.
Yeah, so I live in Yuba City and we have a huge Punjabi population. So I feel like when I was younger, I was exposed to seeing how our community was using substances and a lot of it being alcohol. And like what I've seen with our community, they kind of turn towards alcohol when they want to deal with trauma. But you know what, honestly, like every emotion they go through, they always turn towards alcohol. Either it's a party, they'll get alcohol. It's a funeral, they'll get alcohol. Like any case, they'll always bring in alcohol. So I knew I was exposed to that, but I wasn't really exposed to the other substances, or like I knew they were happening. Again, I was just like, I was turning the other way. Like I was like, okay, like how does this affect me? Like what can I do? So when CAD was presented, I immediately wanted to be a part of it because again, I knew our communities and especially our two high schools in Yuba City, River Valley High School and Yuba City High School, they both have really bad issues with it. And our administration wasn't the easiest to deal with. Again, they just kind of wanted to ignore it. And a lot of these schools don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be like, oh, they didn't want to bring in the stigma of like, oh, like our school has a drug issue, even though it does. They just would want to ignore it. And we definitely saw that coming in when we were trying to implement like Narcan onto campuses. So like I went to Yuba City High School. So we have around 2,000 to 3,000 kids. And we had 4 main bathrooms, but they ended up closing this year 3 of them and only kept 1 bathroom open for 3,000 students to use because of how bad the vape issue was getting. And so like, yeah, I just knew it was really bad at our school. So then once CAD was presented, I knew I wanted to be a part of it.
And I'll ask Irene and then Gurmasal, you can go, or either or, if any of you want to go first.
Okay, I'll go. So Central East, we're from Central East Fresno. The huge issue was vape as well, like bathrooms shut down, just long lines of like kids waiting. And at a point, it like you had to have a hall pass, like specifically written with time, signature, everything. It became very strict, and constantly parents got involved too because of how bad this issue was. Like you can't not like use the restroom during school. And I just seeing that, living through that, seeing fire alarms multiple times a day, it really like ruined high school. Like you weren't able to be a part of high school because of this issue. And when CAD opened up, I knew like something like this would help, at least educating, like, what each substance is. So that's why I wanted to be, a part of it.
Irene.
I'm Irene, again from Fresno. And for me, throughout my life, I've been close with a lot of people who have abused substances, and whether it was family members or friends, like as young as I can remember, I've been exposed to it, like all different types of substances. And I knew like how scary that was, seeing them go through like, whether it was like an addiction or whether it was withdrawal or even trying to be sober or like even successfully being sober. And I felt like I wasn't able to do much because I didn't have much education on it. And I knew like I wanted to make an impact. Like I have a lot of younger cousins and siblings, and like living in this community, there's a big substance abuse problem, and nobody ever wants anybody to go through that. So I wanted to learn more about it.
Yeah, and this kind of, and thank you all for sharing. I just want, so it was when I was a senior in high school 4 years ago, which makes me feel so old, but like 4 years ago, I remember that vaping was like becoming like this, I was only hearing about it, right? And at my high school at that time, the same thing started happening of like some bathrooms would be starting to close off. Like at my high school, like one bathroom was basically known by like all the students as like that, like the bathroom to go to, right? The go-to bathroom. And then slowly, like you guys just shared, bathrooms started closing. And, at some campuses, like my campus was kind of proactive, but like also not to the extent of like trying to protect kids, but just also just trying to like not have to deal with it. Like that's the only reason why they're doing it, not like, not for safety or for the health of the students, but just to kind of, so they don't have to like, have these bathrooms full with smoke or, if a fire alarm goes off or anything like that. So they basically did the same thing. They shut down like, I think 2 of our bathrooms, and we were left with 2 that were like always monitored with, somebody in the vicinity of the bathroom. And to come like 4 years after, just didn't like, that was like kind of, I want to say like that's kind of like the beginning of it. And back like for me in high school, all we like the drug that was always told like to stay away from or was always marijuana or like weed. Or that was the only one, like people like the teachers or even if we have a health or anything like that, that was like the one that they were like, hey, you don't want to do this and this that's gonna like derail your entire life. And so it's like there's so many other drugs out there that the school doesn't even like, not, I don't want to say don't know about, because they do, because they have to deal with all these things like behind the scenes, but like there's some things that they don't want to kind of share, and they'll just rather just put on a smile and keep things moving. And I think this is where the program is going to actually, like, you all were the beginning of trying to challenge those, like, just normalities almost. And I just want to kind of go from there and just ask you guys, like, what was your guys' biggest takeaways from, or like, what experience did you guys gain from this that you guys look back on and be like, this is the reason why I wanted to join this, or this is something I'm taking away to kind of help going forward. If Reen and Marcel, if you guys want to go together first, and then we can go next by next.
Sure. One of my biggest takeaways from CAD was, being able to connect with the students when we would do tablings and such like that, because it really like changed their perspectives on, substance abuse in general, like being able to learn about it and like just seeing their faces when, they actually realize like the actual stuff that's going into their bodies when they vape, smoke in general.
My biggest takeaway, like the thing that always like sticks in my head are like the stories I heard from the people when we were doing tablings at the Gurdwara, especially from like the older folk. Like there was uncles, aunties, coming to me and being like, oh, like I didn't even know we had counselors or we had rehab centers or anything like that. And they're like, everybody has that family member who's either, using alcohol or other substances. And I remember one time, like this uncle really came to me and he told me like his whole life story from, coming from India and coming here and how he used to be an alcoholic and like just all the things that he dealt with, it was like his friend's son passed away from it, sadly. And he was just really impacted and he was like so thankful that this program was here. And because again, like people have said in the Punjabi community, we don't really talk about it. We don't like talking about it. It's just like pushed to the side. And I remember him and many other people were very happy that we were trying to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's not, I just wanted for the listeners as well, like, we were starting to share about like high schools and campuses and students, but there's also the looking inwards into our like more general speaking of our community, and there's alcoholism is something that a lot of families sadly have to deal with, and it can be at the lower end of the scale or the more extreme end of the scale, and that's something that is not easy. And we had an episode last season about dealing with alcoholism with two folks that were part of our OS program that Jakara launched as well, and that was like for people that were dealing with alcohol abuse and substance abuse. So to kind of go back to the question side, what are some experience or something that stands out to you from this previous year that you're taking away looking back?
The biggest thing for me was I didn't realize that like anybody would be struggling with substances. I feel like with the media or with our parents, like just mainly our community, the way they like kind of like show people are using substances, they're like, oh, like the kid who's failing classes, or the kid like there were certain like looks or like views they would like share with you, like, oh, that person's using substances, don't go near them, don't talk to them. But in reality, it could be anybody. It could be like the kid who's like the smartest in your class, who is like rank 1, who does all the AP classes, could be using substances. It could be genuinely anyone. So for me, it would be like, to not really judge anyone. The main point of CAD was not to like, judge someone, be like, oh, why are you using substances? Why are you doing it? It'd be like, okay, now like, let's try helping you. Like now it's like the biggest thing for someone is to admit that they're going through the problem, that they have an addiction, or, they want to fix it. So the biggest thing for me was to not really judge. I feel like I walked into it being kind of judgmental. All of us were kind of raised that way. We were kind of like, we're judged. I remember this one time we were tabling at the Yuba City Gurdwara, and not many people would come up to our table, unfortunately. They kind of would just like look over, kind of see it's from Jakara, and they would kind of see like it's from CAD, and they would kind of like walk away. But I remember this one time, this one uncle came and he started sharing how either his, I think, son or nephew was using substances, and like he kind of was like breaking down like he's like, I don't know what to do. There aren't any resources. I don't know who to talk about. And again, our community doesn't talk about it. And like, even like researching with CAD, we really don't have resources in our area, specifically for Punjabi folks. We don't have anything in our area. But in general, I remember one thing with CAD is you're supposed to research resources and facilities, or like rehab centers, just genuinely anything you could provide, like, you know, folks with resources. We really didn't have much, and we had nothing for Punjabi people. So yeah.
And then Paul?
I feel like I genuinely got to grow a lot from CAD altogether, because like Sahaj mentioned, there's a lot of antagonism directed towards people who do use substances. Often we grow up with the phrase, say no to drugs, or stay away from people entirely who use drugs. And I know I was one of those people, right? I had a friend in around 6th grade who started using drugs, and growing up in that environment, I pushed them away entirely because I didn't want to involve myself with drugs, right? But the CAD internship instead taught me that instead of antagonizing these people, we need to break that barrier and start communicating with these people, right? We need to provide them resources. We need to talk to them. We need to show them love and support, because these people, a lot of the time, you don't even know who's using drugs, right? So if you're not communicating, how are you going to provide that help? And an experience that really, really stuck out with me was the needle exchange, because that was one of the first events that we did do. And I went in there and I still had that antagonism that I was raised with, right? But then when I went there, I realized that these people weren't what we thought them out to be, right? Like we paint them as like such an evil, as like they're so bad, right? But in realistic, they're not. They're like everyday people. They're like you and me, right? Like they're not these monsters that our community paints out. And when I was at that needle exchange, I got to talk to them, and they were so loving and so inviting. And I got to meet so many of them when we handed out products. And that experience really stuck with me because it definitely taught me not to antagonize anyone, no matter how you're raised. You should always show love and always provide resources, because you never know who's going through what, right?
I can see why Jasmeet said you're pro at this before we started, because like I just like, snapping, you'll see if you're watching the video version, and if you've seen Jasmeet or me snapping, that's kind of like when you're in a Jakara space, we when we agree with something, but we don't want to clap, or we snap. So if you just, if you randomly see us snapping while we're muted, it's not because we're just funly snapping. It's usually because of that. And thank you, Inderpal, for sharing, because I think, and all of you guys for sharing, because I think every one of you guys just shared a very powerful, personal, I think, takeaway, which kind of opens up this door of seeing that this is not something that just affects a very small percentage of our population, right? This can almost affect every single one, because you can either have a friend that is in those spaces that they're like, in the you just mentioned, you had a friend that was starting to use substances very early on, or Gurmasa, you shared like in our community, alcoholism, or at the Gurdwara, like people were talking, and Avreen and Gurmasa, you guys mentioned the same thing. So it's like, it's not just like, even though you might not, like we use this thing of like, you say no to drugs, right? You want to stay away. If anybody uses drugs around you, you want to stay away from them. And that's something that we've been told as little kids. Like if you see somebody using drugs, oh, they're a bad person, right? They don't know what they're doing in their life. They're a bad person. So I just think sharing these moments, and as long as like also sharing them with others, is very key. And that's why I just want to say again, thank you for joining me this episode. Just maybe before we continue, I have a couple questions actually for you as well. From you being a fellow and you having to interview interns and high schoolers for these positions, what were you guys like specifically looking for? What did like interns do in terms of like a day-to-day basis, or like throughout the year type thing, like projects and stuff, just in case if there's any high schoolers that are listening now that want to be involved, or they have an interest, and you can just kind of explain to them, pitch this program to them right here, right now. I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's kind of what I'm doing.
Not pitching anything. But The interns, I didn't fully do the interviews fully, but I did get to see like what kids were chosen. But we did try and see like who's like a freshman, a sophomore, junior, or a senior, just to see like range. Cause like we know that if it's a freshman, we can like try and see if we can get through like more years with them. And then with seniors, we know they would be more powerful in certain aspects because of like they're going to be taking this from here and then they're going to go forward into like college and things like that. So they have other places that they'll be able to take it to. And then we just try to see like who was really interested as well. Like if they are trying to go into the mental health field or if they're trying to just do any, like just trying to get educated on them, like for themselves, that's what we're also looking for. So I know they had like questions that they had to answer. And so they went through that and said, like, just made sure they were like wanting to do this because it is a lot of work. We do not just don't give them work. We give them things to do and it's on top of whatever they're doing. So here we have like band members and people who have like 4 or 5 clubs that they're in. And so that was something hard for like for some people to do is because they were like, oh wait, I have this to do or I have work to go do. But we also tried our best like to minimize like the homework. Well, in Fresno, I don't know about everywhere else, but in Fresno, I tried my best not to, I minimized like work. I didn't try to like push too much work on them, but they did have like work they had to do. There was a letter every month that they had to go through as well. So whatever we did that month, we had like 2 people pick what they liked about it and then we wrote about it. The project that they had to do is mostly just getting ready for the school board meetings. Like they just had to get ready for that or a city council meeting. So some places went to city council and talked about like what they have been doing throughout the year. And it was really good. So if you do want to join, it's never bad. Like it's something that like you get paid for like $1,000 as a high schooler. Like who wouldn't want that? Like $1,000, come on. So I feel like it was totally worth it at the end because they do get educated on certain things. And it was our first year. So we learned like with our hiccups. So we know that for sure you're going to get CPR certified and Narcan training. So like you are certified 2 ways already. So they can take this as they keep going. With their CPR, they can keep getting renewed. And then for their Narcan, they can keep getting like renewed as well because they're certified. So they can keep getting more Narcans every year when they expire. So it's not like they can't take this education forward. One thing I always like said about like this internship was like, don't say no to drugs because that's what we came into. So when every time we would talk to them in the beginning, they'd be like, yeah, say no to drugs. And we're like, no. Like we're here to educate students on drugs. We're here to like teach about control. We're here to teach about like maintaining, not like telling them, hey, don't do it. Because that's something that we should not be controlling. That's on that person that is using. It's just better to educate and letting them know about like, hey, if you are going to use this, this is what could happen to you if you keep using or whatever you're trying to use. This is what you, it will be like your choice of like yes or no on your own. It was just providing that education. So it's awesome to have that. And then I remember also these high schoolers in the beginning, not just these ones, but any other ones, they were worried about snitching. They thought they were going to snitch, like they were going to be snitches and like the students won't come up to them because then people will know they use drugs. And so we let them know like, hey, like that's not what we're here for. We're here to help them. So if they need any like resources, we have those on campus. Like we had NAMI, which is a great program at our school that taught about mental health or any resources like suicide prevention or anything like that. They had a whole club for that. And then we just had every resource, school psychologist, counselors, therapists, like we had that on campus. So we wanted to give them and reach out for them as well. So it was just like resources and they were able to hand that to the school. So it was really cool.
Thank you. And it's funny that it's not funny, but it's like, I was going to go to this next question for the interns for you all. Talking about like struggles you guys had this year. Jasmeet just mentioned, a couple of high schoolers were afraid of the snitching aspect. They were kind of like, how do I deal with this? Was there anything that you guys struggled? This could be with, having to speak at, the board meeting or the school board meeting, or struggle with, a personal story that you guys might have heard that was like kind of really difficult for you guys to kind of listen to it all and kind of process it all. Anything along those lines, any struggle or any like tough moment that you guys had this. And it's, again, like I said, this is whatever you're willing to share. I'm not going to try to force any of you guys to share something you guys don't want to, but if there is like, if you do want to share, if anybody just wants to unmute themselves and go, because I don't want to kind of force anybody to speak if they don't want to about this.
I would definitely say for me, it was like the lack of seriousness. I know when we were doing presentations at Ridgeview, like we would go into rooms and like while we presented, there were kids laughing in the back and like laughing whenever we talked about fentanyl or marijuana or substance abuse in general. And I feel like that's just a coping method for a lot of people. Like even if they do use substances, like they'll just try to laugh it off because a lot of people like know the risks that they could be getting themselves into. And once like someone falls down the rabbit hole, they want to avoid like all seriousness related to the topic altogether. So a lot of the time, like they'll just try to scare off people who are trying to communicate, right? But in that sense, I took that with me and I was like, if people are going to try to laugh it off, I'm going to stay there. I'm not going to just leave, right? Like I'm going to use that as motivation to keep trying to ensure that people are educated about all the risks associated with things that they're using before they continue to make decisions.
Thank you for sharing. Any others? And Saj or Aveen or Marcel? Like I said, I don't want to force you guys to speak, but if you guys want to share.
For us, for Yuba City specifically, we had a lot of changes with our fellow. So we started off with one fellow and they unfortunately had to leave. And then her Gideon, our community organizer in Yuba City, she kind of had to step in. It was really hard because, community organizer, it's like a full-time job. So she had her full-time job and she was trying to, be our fellow. And then in the beginning of the second semester, so like maybe like around February, March, we got just Gideon, who was our fellow for the rest of the time. So it was kind of hard to, for us, I know, kind of have like just a schedule and kind of like we weren't half the time, but then once just Gideon stepped in, it was a lot easier. And also our school board isn't the easiest to deal with. I remember going earlier for redistricting and they were extremely unprofessional and rude. So when it comes to talking about substances within our community and specifically schools, their responses, like they were fine. It's just they didn't like, I don't know, it just seemed like they kind of didn't want us there. So I think we went to school board around like 2 times. And the second time they finally kind of like were, responding back. They were kind of being more like they were engaging more, but they definitely were not the easiest to deal with. And I know administration also was hard to get into contact with. And there was multiple times where just Gideon wasn't able to get contact. So one of us had to kind of step out during class and, kind of track down our principal and be like, hey, like, can you just take us seriously real quick? And with Narcan, I think that was the hardest thing, was trying to bring it on our campuses. And I have no idea what's going on with our 2 Yuba City schools because they said it wasn't like, I'll get to that in a second, but basically like when I went to our principal, so one of the interns at River Valley went to talk to the principal and then I went to go talk to our Yuba City principal. And when I was talking to him, he really didn't know what Narcan was. So after we had a discussion about what Narcan was, he was like, okay, like I'll try finding out. And then when he went to the nurse was like, no, there's around Narcan, like we don't have it because we don't want it to seem like our school is, suffering with substances, even though we definitely are. I know during distance learning, during quarantine, many of our students had overdosed and passed, and none of the school wanted to address the fact that they had passed due to using substances. So we didn't carry it. And at River Valley, I think they did have it. I'm not sure if it was expired or only one person had it. Yeah, I think one of the officers were carrying it, but it was expired. Like, what's the point at that point? And then we talked to school board about it and they were like, okay, like, this is something that is like, has to go to a different board. And they just kept like making more like things. So like, okay, maybe next time. So the second time we talked to them, they said it was in discussion and that they're going to try bringing it onto our campuses. But again, with our board, I think the CAD interns this year will have to really push for it to like finally get it at our campuses.
So just before we do continue, if you don't mind, if I think you would probably be educated about what Narcan is because we've mentioned it a couple of times here. I have the privilege of knowing what it was at Nishan when the interns that were there presented about it. But so if you can, tell us, our viewers, a little bit about what that is, so we just don't be calling it by name.
Yeah, of course.
Go ahead.
I'll talk a little bit about it, but just if you want to add something in the end, in case I missed anything. But basically, it's a spray and it can't get you high. But if someone is overdosing, it's really important that someone is trained with Narcan so they could use that on them and it could instantly save you. So I know with all of the CAD interns and fellows, I believe everyone is Narcan certified and all of us carry it as well. But basically, it's just a nasal spray that could save someone who is overdosing.
I'm just going to add a little to it, but yeah, so it is, it's supposed to help with fentanyl overdose mostly. And then if you are administrating it into like, as a nasal spray, it just goes into one nostril and you have to lay the body to the side. So we can't just like lay them in a certain way. And then you have to like get them to waken up a little bit. So you got to kind of like press on their chest a little and then like administer the Narcan. And yeah, so all of the interns cannot take it to school because it is a drug. So they weren't able to carry it on campus, but they were Narcan certified more than anybody else was at the school. So that was actually really cool to know, like all the interns were certified and they were able to do that. So if somebody had an Narcan, they would have been able to administer that right away. And then they also do have it in a like an EpiPen style. So they do have it in a pen style as well that people can carry. So if they say they don't have the nasal spray, they have a different version that is a little bit stronger, they say, than the spray. Because we have two that it comes with. So if the first one doesn't work, you have to use the second one. So that's also that.
Perfect. And then, going back to the question, if Farina or Marcel, if you guys wanted to kind of share about any struggles or anything that kind of, you guys kind of had to deal with that was kind of unexpected for you all?
For me, what I realized, one of our biggest problems since the beginning was our outreach and getting people to actually come to our tables. And we had different posters of different substances with all these facts on them. We felt like we were very prepared on what information we would give, but actually getting people to want to come to the table, that's it's they're talking about drugs. Why would I want to go there? It was very hard, especially in the Gurdwaras. Everybody kind of just stared at us, and sometimes they would ask what it's about. And once we told them it was about substances, they would kind of walk away. And so that was very hard. And even with the students, Inderbal said, some people would either laugh about it or, they just weren't serious. And it took a while to finally get people to start coming to the tables. And, when people started coming, more people would follow. But that was definitely a long process.
Overall, it was the students that struggled more with focusing about what we were actually there for rather than the staff. The staff at our school was actually really, really helpful and useful when we needed them. Board meetings, it was kind of an easy ride through implementing Narcan. They were really supportive about it at Central.
I can also add,
yeah.
sorry. I just want to add,
ahead.
what was hard as well for us was how she was saying that we would getting just the outreach. So even having movie nights at even at the youth center or even having anything that we were doing, it was hard to get any of the adults to come. So even parents that are have high school students in the school that we are at, it was hard to get them to come and see this as well. Because we also wanted to educate them because they don't even know what's happening at their their kids' high school. So it was something we also wanted to educate them as well when we were watching movies or even just trying to get the community out. So it was something that we realized was the outreach was really hard. Even if we posted things everywhere, even at the schools, if we posted posters, it was just a little too hard to get an outreach. And even just wanting people to actually want to be educated. So even with just our own interns or even just everybody else, we just want to educate. And it was just hard to get that reach of hey, do you want to learn? We want to teach you. We have so much to tell you. And then they were just no, leave me alone. And you're just no, let me tell you. So it was just that.
I wanted to add on to that actually, because I know coming into this, I knew about just vapes, weed, and alcohol. And one of the things I didn't even know by name was fentanyl. And so first of all, learning about that was oh wow, it's such a big problem, especially in Fresno. and I didn't even know about it. And so I know when we were trying to educate the students, especially, that's kind of like the mindset they had too. They were like, oh, like we already know about the drugs on the campus. We already know about weed, or we already know about vapes or whatever. And they weren't like, it was hard for them to want to learn that there's other substances and what the other different types of substances can do to them.
Yeah, and thank you guys for sharing as well. Going back to kind of the point I made a couple minutes ago was about like when I was in high school, like the only main focus or the only one we kind of like, were kind of told the way to stay was weed or marijuana at the time. And, vapes were relatively still kind of new at that time. And, cigarettes had kind of died out, in high school times during my, when I went to high school. But there's so many other drugs that we kind of look past or we don't even know about, but they're there, like they're in, especially once sometimes when you go and hang out with friends, maybe it's like new friends that you're making, or you just don't know what's around you as your first couple times, and that kind of just go like that, not knowing just gets even more when you get to college. Like I can just tell you that for sure. Like in college it's like you have to be very like aware of your thing, like what's around you, because it will be very like it'll take split seconds to be unaware of what's around you. And 1 second you can be doing something and then the next second you might be given something or without even like so you got like the fact that like you all are kind of already starting that before for the seniors that are going to go to college this upcoming year, like because you guys have a little bit more of a basis and understanding about things than I think I did when I came out of high school. And that just goes to show like, we're taking steps in the right direction and going forward. And that's always a good thing. And I think the next year when this upcoming year for CARE is going to be even more important because this will be the building phase. Everything, you have to start somewhere. And once you started, now it's, what can we build off of this? And Jasmeet, I was actually going to go to you now, but you had already shared about like, a struggle or something that you thought was a struggle for you. But I also want to ask you about like, what was your, like looking back this past year, like what's your, biggest takeaway or your, a moment that you kind of still remember to this day from this past year?
I take away that all these interns did such a great job. Like, not just my own interns in Fresno, but like everywhere else. Here, we got to hear what happened in Yuba all the time and how everything was hard for them. They had like lost their fellow, and then like even Sag had to like step up and was like calling her own interns and telling them like, hey, we have a meeting coming up. So even knowing that like is amazing to know that she was able to step up and be like, hey, like I want to keep this going. And then even in hearing in Bakersfield how much they've done, we weren't even able to go into the classrooms. We were able to go onto like CTV, which is our TV that we have, like that like homeroom situation where they like talk about their announcements. They were able to educate through that, but I rather have like what Interpol and them did was like they were able to go to the classrooms and just like tell the students about what they learned. So it was just amazing to hear like everybody and what they have learned. So what I take away is just that whatever we did as fellows, like we were able to like give to the students and they're able to take this as they go on. Hopefully they keep taking it and like educating other people. But it was just amazing to like notice those changes of like where they first started from the retreat when we first met all of them to like now knowing like how much they have learned, how much they have taken away. So it was like really great to have that because there's a lot of things that like we didn't mention, like we did intergenerational trauma that we talked about. We also talked about other like health and like mental health that like people go through. And so it's just like amazing, like what they have knowledge of and they're able to go and outsource and tell other people. So that's what I'm proud of and seeing like high schoolers doing this. Cause I know when I was younger, we didn't have that. And then even if we knew there was like drugs and alcohol happening and like things are happening at our school, we always turned around and be like, hey, I don't want to snitch on them. Like, I'm not saying anything or I'm not helping them. So it's always like we were talking about ourselves all the time. So now they were able to be like, hey, let me like, I have a hand for you. Like, let me help you. Let me see what I can do for you rather than like being like, deuces is not my problem. So that was something that was really cool to see. So yeah, that's what I take away is like, all these interns, the best interns I've ever had. I'm going to miss a lot of my seniors because I'm not going to see them ever again. So unless you go to like Jakara, you're never leaving Jakara, but like just know that I will be missing them for like the CAD internship.
And it's kind of, I just want to kind of before we move on, just again I want to say that how proud I am of all of you. Again, just me shared that, like, not on top, like, not only did you guys have your guys' school, but you guys also had, if you're in sports or in band or, in other clubs. And then on top of that, there's also family responsibilities that, you have to, those kind of come priorities, or, they become priority very quickly. But all beside that, you guys still, dedicated time out of your guys', days and your schedules to, want to work for this. It's just kind of like you stepping up in terms of like wanting to even organize those around you to kind of keep going, even though there was, a draw, like you guys had a hardship of a fellow. But it's just like, I just want to highlight all of you right now in this moment, because you guys just, there's something about about you four, and also all the interns that kind of would have joined that are not here with us today. I just want to, from me, I just want to say that I'm very happy that this program exists, and I just hope that we continue going forward with this program, because I can see how much of a difference it's already starting to make, not just, in terms of like the physical aspects of it, but also just, educational wise, and all of you guys, even today, taking the time out of your guys' days and joining me on this podcast to talk about you guys' experiences and, your stories and your struggles is just, I just want to say thank you. But I just want to ask the seniors, Saj and Inderpal and Avreen and Grimahal, you guys can also talk about this as well. But like, now that you guys are kind of moving on from, you guys can't unfortunately be a part of it next year, because you guys will be going to college. What is something that you guys would say to, somebody, let's say it's like a friend that's still in high school that you still have, like, what would you tell them about, like, maybe about this, or what you've learned, or, hey, you should join CARE, like, why, what would you go, like, well, how would you go about that? What is a message you guys would probably want to give to somebody that might be thinking about that? Inderpal, if you want to go first.
Can you guys hear me all right? My internet connection is really unstable.
I can hear you. We can hear you. Right.
Okay, so what I would definitely say is that there's a lot to learn from the CAD program. Like I said, I was one of those people that pushed people away who did use substances, and it allowed me personally to grow a lot and actually approach people and communicate with them and ask them what they're going through. It definitely helps you grow as a character altogether. But even outside of that, it teaches you really, really important life lessons, like becoming a leader, how to communicate, right? Because we've communicated with higher ups, like principals of our schools. We've been to school board meetings, and I would definitely say it's a great experience that helps you grow as an individual. So I would recommend almost anyone to this program.
Saj.
I think Inderpal put it beautifully. Like, you grow so much as a person, and CAD presents you with so many different opportunities, and like each CAD in different areas like bring in so much. Like Bakersfield had the drive where they were able to talk to people who were using substances, and they were able to go into classrooms. And I know Fresno had mentioned they were doing other stuff as well. Like, I think the TV thing, like where they were able to talk about it. With Yuba and SAC area, or just Yuba, and I know the 209 area, we had this opportunity to go to this thing at the state capitol called Youth Quest, which was basically a tobacco control initiative, youth advocates. So basically all the youth from all over California were able to get together at the state capitol, and we were educated on like commercial tobacco and kind of how it contributes to, wildfires and toxic air quality and like destruction of our environment. And then in the end of that, they like separate us into different groups, and we were able to share this information with other legislators and what our local efforts were going to be after that. So each CAD presents you with so many different opportunities and so many different experiences that you're definitely going to like take on with the rest of your life. Like, I feel so much more confident, like after CAD, especially, talking to our administrators, talking to our school board, the communication aspect, like I feel like I just learned a lot more.
Avreen also graduated.
Okay, yeah, I'm so sorry. Avrina, if you also want to share.
Yeah, no worries. One of the things that like really got me attached to the program, I guess I would say, is I started with this program and I feel like I'm a very empathetic person. I wanted to learn about everybody's perspectives and everything, but first of all, I didn't know most of the interns. And then we kind of became this family. We like taught each other. If like, let's say, Jasmeet Didi gave us this homework, outside of it, we'd be talking to each other like, okay, like this is what I learned, or this is what I learned, or this is the experience I had. And I feel like it's a very good opportunity to see how other people are. Because obviously you only get to live life with your perspective, but it's a very amazing opportunity to see all these other like people and how you can help them. And just, I don't know, it's very eye-opening.
Yeah, and thank you all of you for sharing. And I don't have any more questions, but I want to just, but I do have a couple questions for Jasmeet, and this is kind of ground leveling for the program in general. If you know, just in case, like, there are people interested or are here that want more information. Is there anywhere they can go in terms of like a website or anywhere we can send them?
Mostly everything's usually at jakara.org. And you can also do jakara.org/CAD. It should be on there, right? I might be wrong, but it could be jakara.org/CAD. Even for the internship, there's applications. So that's where you would go to do your applications. So we are still open to get students to get on. So if you're at Central East or at Yuba or at Bakersfield, come join us. And then for the jobs, for if they are trying to do, I don't know if we're still taking any more for fellows, but it would be jakara.org/jobs, and they would say like youth and fellowship or something like that. I meant to, CAD fellowship on there.
Oh, yeah.
But that's pretty much where it is. So yeah, jakara.org.
So jakara.org. Like always, we'll have it in the description as well if you're watching on YouTube. So just click the description, you can go straight to there. If you are interested in working for Jakara, but you don't, if this might not be your cup of tea, there are other jobs. So please go to jakara.org/jobs. There are many openings right now for you, and you can find whichever one you would want to be a part of, and be a part of this big happy family here at Jakara. And we, like, there's these smaller families that we create, like, for me, most recently was my family, or our Jakara family at JMC Davis, but always coming together. We just came from Lilakar, which is our collegiate conference where me and Jasmeet were a couple of days ago, a week ago now. Wow, time flies so fast. I can't believe it's been a week, but we were talking, and Saj, you were also there too. I don't want to, and Inderpal was also there. So sorry. But we were all there, and it's just like, coming together as this big, huge sangha is just like, one of my highlights of our summers. And it's just fun to be in those spaces. And I encourage anybody that, if you are listening to this and if you're not in part of anything, if you're a high schooler and you at your school, if you have an SHSS, I recommend joining that. If you don't, please connect with your local community organizer and start one at your campus. And that same thing goes for your collegiate students as well. Like I said, I don't have any more questions, but if there's anything you guys want to share about this past year being part of Khair that we kind of didn't touch a base on, this is the time. You guys can just unmute yourself and say. If not, then we can start wrapping up. Any closing remarks? No? Thumbs up from Inderpal. I'm going to take that as the silence, eerie silence, as there's nothing else. But again, one last thank you to all you guys for joining. And thank you to everybody that's still listening. Coming to a year and a half later, it's still kind of makes me not aware. It just still surprises me of how much love and support that we get. And we're growing as a team as well here at this podcast. It was me, and now we have a couple other folks that are helping me create this wonderful platform for folks like we were joined by today. But yeah, with that, I would just say, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.